This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm your host, Mac Pritchard. I'm also the founder of Mac's List. It's a job board in the Pacific Northwest that helps you find a fulfilling career. Every Wednesday, I talk to a different expert about the tools you need to get the work you want. Find Your Dream Job is brought to you by Top Resume. Top Resume has helped more than 400,000 professionals land more interviews and get hired faster. Get a free review of your resume today. Go to maxlist.org/topresume. It can be tough to return to the workplace after a long absence. Whether you've taken a break to care for family or you've been out of work through no choice of your own, you might find recruiters reluctant to meet you. Sonal Bahl is here today to talk about how to deal with long-term unemployment. She's a career strategist and founder of Supercharge, a career advisory firm. She also hosts the excellent How I Got Hired podcast, and she joins us from Brussels in Belgium. So now let's get started. Why are some recruiters reluctant to talk to people who've been unemployed for a long time?
There's a bunch of reasons, and I'm going to get into it. The very first reason to hesitate is convenience, and it sounds harsh, but it's sometimes it can be a harsh world. The job of the recruiter is what? It's always urgent. I want this position yesterday. That's what the boss always says. And they have to give this short list of 4 to 5 people to the hiring manager. Now, they have a short list. They're going through the resumes. This is their job, screening them, right? And then somebody looks like something's not adding up, or it's not necessarily in a certain predictable fashion. They'll put it to the side. Let me get back to that later. So the first reason can be convenience. The second reason, which is even more harsh, is this thing called vicious circle of unemployment, which is the longer you are unemployed, the more unemployable you might appear in the market. Is it fair? No, it's not, which is why bridge jobs are essential, not just from an optics point of view, but also from a savings point of view. The third reason recruiters hesitate is there's a high risk perception, right? So, Mac, imagine you're interviewing someone and this person shows up in front of you and they've got tattoos all over their arm, or their resume says they've been switching every 6 to 12 months. There is a risk perception. It's the same thing. If this person's been on a break, will they take another break? The fourth reason, and the last one, is this perception of diminished skills. Do they still have it? Whether it's business acumen or technical skills. I think primarily that would summarize why recruiters tend to hesitate.
That's the why, and I know we're going to talk about what you can do about those perceptions. The one I want to dig into, Sonal, is about that what you described as that vicious circle of unemployment, and this is someone who likely is out of work through no fault of their own. Why do recruiters have that perception that this person is a risk? Is there evidence to support that idea?
I don't know of any evidence. Honestly, it comes down to good old-fashioned bias, I think, Mac. And what happens is, this is a very strange thing. Let's say you're in transition right now, and you used to be a recruiter. And then you get a job, and now you're back in the shoes of the recruiter or the hiring manager. The sense of empathy is very, very easily forgotten. And when you're interviewing someone and they're going through a hard time, I don't see this very commonly, that people are like, hey, I know what it's like. I'm going to do my best to help them. And they're like, no, I've moved on. I know this is a bit anecdotal, but I've seen this plenty in my HR career. And I was always very careful to steer clear from that. So one is the bias. Second is sometimes the lack of empathy. I don't see any research to this effect. In fact, I can put my hat in the ring and say there might be research to the contrary, where people are unemployed for a while, and when they get back, there's a higher sort of willingness to prove that they still have it and they're loyal.
You talked about some of the reasons why people might take a break, and I think when you think about this, the first example that comes to mind is someone who's lost a job, either because they've been discharged or through no fault of their own, a layoff, a change in a business model. But there are other reasons why people are unemployed for long terms. Can you talk more about that?
Life happens to all of us. Sometimes good stuff and sometimes not so good stuff. And the definition of having a pause in your career is that period of time, at least for me, when you're not gainfully employed, you're not earning. And there's six types of breaks that typically people take. The first one, which I'm going to say, which is not a break, where many people confuse it, is entrepreneurship. I started something, or I did a bit of freelancing or consulting. That is not a pause because you were gainfully employed. So the first traditional reason why people take breaks is family reasons, right? You either had kids or you have aging parents and you need to take care of them. So that's family. Second is health, your own health. Something happened, you had to rest, you had to recover. The third is the most common one we see these days. In fact, for a long time, we've been seeing them, and that's layoffs, restructuring, and you lost your job. The fourth is you study and in fact you're preparing for, in certain countries, Mac, I'm sure you're aware, you have very difficult sort of competitive exams to get into a coveted program, whether it's in medicine or business or law. People take time off to study for those. So that's a really common reason for taking a gap. The fifth one is being a trailing spouse. Your husband or your wife had this fantastic job in a different city or a different country, and in that period of time you were not able to find work. And the last one, which is a slightly more positive one, is travel. Once the world opens up after COVID and the world 2.0, even before that, right, people want to take time off, enjoy life a little bit. 1 year off, 2 years off, they call it a gap year, right, between college and working. So these are, I would say, six very good reasons for having a break in your career.
Well, let's talk about what you can do when you are going back into the workforce to help a recruiter understand why you've been out of work for some time. You've got a 5-part model, Sonal, and it's got a great acronym. It's called PAUSE, PAUSE.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to take us through each of those 5 parts. And the first step, the P in PAUSE, is to be proactive. What do you mean by that?
When they teach you in sales, right? When there's going to be objections, address them upfront. They're thinking it. So I like to get ahead of that and be proactive. And I share this with my clients. So if you don't do that, and there is this mysterious gap in your resume, it can make people draw X number of conclusions. And that's what you don't want. So one is the tactical thing, and the other thing I'm going to explain is a bit more sort of strategic. The tactical thing, which I recommend here, is when you have your resume and you're like, okay, between 2018 and 2020, you don't have to get into the months of it. It gets distracting, particularly if it was less than 6 months or just under a year. You could say 2018 to 2019. That helps to contain it. So the other thing I want to say is you can be very creative in how you address it in your resume. Let's say you had a baby, right? Rather than had a baby, well, full stop. Okay, no, I have a better suggestion. How about proactively oversaw the end-to-end care towards the health of our newborn? That's a big deal. I mean, you brought life into the world. That's huge. Or if you moved cities or countries, rather than just say trailing spouse, which you make it sound like, you're like diminished. It can be like, okay, 2016 to 2020, career pause, establishment of a home in several overseas destinations, while maintaining a strong family foundation with our 2 children. That's wonderful, right? So when I say creative, I don't mean lie or embellish anything. You're just saying the truth. But I can tell you, words matter. And that takes me to the second point. Attitude. P is proactive, A is attitude. Pay strong attention to your attitude and how you perceive the pause in your own head. Can't stress this enough.
And Sonal, I want to talk about attitude, but let's let's pause on the P here. And what happens if you don't provide an explanation?
You leave this open to interpretation. If it's not explained on LinkedIn, and now on LinkedIn we have those choices, right? Sam and Saad, SAHM, stay at home mom, stay at home dad. You have those. If you don't, you leave it open and open for interpretation. I'm not sure that's always a good thing.
I want to take a break, and it's a great conversation. When we come back, Sonal Bahl will continue to share her advice on how to deal with long-term unemployment. The best resumes tell a story, not only about the breaks you took, but also about what you offer. Does your resume do this? Ask an expert. Go to maxlist.org/top resume. Top Resume will review your resume for free. Go to maxlist.org/top resume. You'll find out how to tell your career story better. And if you want, you can hire Top Resume to update your resume for you. Go to maxlist.org/top resume. Now, let's get back to the show. We're back in the Max List studio. I'm talking with Sonal Bahl. She's a career strategist and founder of Supercharge. It's a career advisory firm. Sonal is also the host of the terrific podcast, How I Got Hired, and she joins us from Brussels in Belgium. Now, Sonal, before the break, we were working through your 5-part model. The acronym is PAUSE, about how to deal with long-term unemployment. And let's talk about the A in PAUSE, about attitude. Why is it important to pay attention to your attitude?
Attitude is everything. Attitude is the glue that brings it all together. And when you have this attitude that I've been on a break of 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever, it's going to come across that I'm less than you. I had a break. You're my interviewer. I'm less than you, which comes across as a little bit sort of desperate, and it comes across as the opposite of a level playing field, right? It's like tilted in the favor of the hiring manager. That is complete nonsense. You have certain skills, even if you think they're diminished, they're there. So words matter. There's plenty of research out there that proves it. The choice of words matters a lot. So instead of thinking of it as a gap, which has a negative connotation, how about addressing it as a transition? This is a transition. I'm in transition currently. It sounds, I don't know, I feel a little bit better about it. So I can't stress this enough, because if you have this attitude where you're less than, it will come across. And if you have the opposite attitude, it will come across that you're really confident. And they won't even pay attention to you. They won't even pay attention to the gap that you have in your resume. And that, Mac, is fantastic news when it comes to salary negotiations, because you don't think of your gap as a liability.
I like your point that many people feel they need to almost apologize for this period of long-term unemployment. Why shouldn't you be defensive about it, Sonal?
There is absolutely no reason to be defensive about it. And the reason people apologize is, I'm not going to get into it. That's going to be a sociology lesson, but it's really the conditioning, right? Conditioning that work is worship, work is good. And if you take time off, the bus has left the station. Where are you? We've moved on. FOMO, all of that. But if COVID has taught us anything, it's that life happens to all of us. And people who are judging others, life is going to happen to them as well. So it's better to be honest and upfront from the get-go.
And instead of being defensive, can you give us a practical example of how people should, what kind of attitude they should bring into an interview, or perhaps in the text they share in their resume or cover letters?
Exactly. No, that's a great question. And I'm going to address that in the E of pause, if that's okay. Yeah? Awesome.
Oh, yeah. Well, let's get to that. But number 3 in pause is U, and that stands for upgrade your skills. How can upgrading your skills help you get back to work, Sonal?
Yes. So there's 2 types of skills we're talking about here. We all know the technical hard skills. When I'm saying hard, I'm putting air quotation marks. Hard skills that you needed on the job. If you're in finance, then staying in touch with what's happening in IFRS or Sarbanes-Oxley or whatever. If it's in technical, the latest software. That, yes, there's never been an easier time to stay in touch. You've got everything in the palm of your hand, the phone, the internet, the laptop. There's also other skills which I would argue are more important, life skills, right? Let's say you took time off to take care of your elderly dad, and in that period of time you were doing everything for him. So let's say you're looking forward to getting back as a project manager, but that period of time you can be like, that was my project management time. I was responsible for ensuring catering, driving, or x number of things. It's a question of mapping good old fashioned transferable skills which are needed in your dream job and what you do today. And I can bet you, our dear listener, right now, the thing that you think is insignificant, be careful, because there's something called the curse of knowledge. I'm like, yeah, I know, but everybody does this. Everybody knows this. No, they don't. And you're pretty amazing at it. And you kept stuff, going together, and nothing was falling apart. So use this period of time. So if you've had a baby, fantastic organization skills. Getting the baby to go to bed at 7 p.m. Anybody who's a parent knows that's nothing short of a miracle. Diapers, crying, everything. Patience, efficiency, productivity, all of those skills have, gone up tenfold because of the transition period in your career. So that's the you.
I like your point that you need to do a self-assessment and look at what you've been doing in the home or in the community or elsewhere. Because many people, when they hear upgrade your skills, they think, well, that means getting a graduate degree or returning to get a bachelor's or perhaps a certificate. How do you figure out as a job seeker which of those skills that you have been practicing in your home or your community are going to matter to recruiters?
It's simple. You check out those job descriptions and you speak to the recruiters, and you speak to them in their language and figure out what they want. And I can tell you, going back to school, as much as I loved my education, but going back to school is highly overrated. Unless you're going into transitions like I don't know, medicine or law, where you need license to operate, there's absolutely no need to go back to school. Those short-term courses are great, but we focus too much on the learning part. At the end of the day, what do they want? If you look at most jobs today, Mac, they're all about the following four, right? I'm oversimplifying, but here you go. It's all about how you can help that company to A, make money, B, save money, C, save time, and D, build their reputation, brand reputation, etc. If you can show them you can do one, two, or all four of these things, you're the person they want. And showing is a lot more powerful than telling. So that comes across in the interviews, where you've done your research and you know exactly what their pain area is and why this position exists today and how you are the answer to their prayers.
The fourth letter in your pause model is S. And Sonal,
Steering.
steering the conversation. Talk to us about that, Sonal.
Yes, this is a black hole that a lot of us go into. Particularly, I can tell you, when it comes to things like health, and if something is very raw, we're talking to friends, right? It can happen. You go into details, and the other person may or may not be that interested to listen to every little detail. So it's very important to check yourself before you wreck yourself. Meaning, you've got to take charge of how this conversation is going. So you got to be in the driver's seat of the conversation. So, rather than say, yes, I had this break, I'd rather not talk about it. No, okay. Yes, I had this break in my career where I had, my child was actually very ill. But, he's absolutely fine now and he's back to school. So steer the conversation to business, because that's why you're there. And if you don't do that, they are steering it, and the car may go in to a destination you don't want it to go. So that's why you need to be in charge.
Many people are uncomfortable in the interview room doing that. What's your best tip for steering the conversation if you've never done it before, Sonal?
So, there's certain questions which are illegal in many parts of the world, and I know in many states in the US. So if you feel like it's going somewhere and you're not comfortable where it's going, So you can be like, as I was saying, so in my last organization, focus on accomplishments that they'll be interested in. And there the role of the interviewer is very important, but so is yours, right? And if there are weird questions coming and you're suddenly like sweating and feeling very nervous about it, it's like, hey, that's an interesting question. Can you help me understand what makes you ask that question? Something unrelated, right? You can see there's bias going on. So by doing that very politely yet very firmly, you are giving the impression that you're a professional and you're there for a very specific reason, and that is to land the job. And over explaining um, has its negative points, and you want to steer away from that. And the best way to do that, Mac, is practice with a friend, practice with a coach, practice in front of the mirror, practice in front of the phone, and record yourself, because you'll be like, oh my god, do I really ramble? Yeah.
The last letter in the pause motto is E, and it stands, as you mentioned before, for knowing your edge. What are you getting at here, Sonal?
Yeah, this is my favorite of the 5-part process, and it's very counterintuitive. So bear with me. The E in says edge, right? So it's saying is, when you do a good old fashioned SWOT analysis, SWOT. There's another acronym I'm throwing to you. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Right? That's a very common thing that's done in the corporate world. Um, the perceived weakness is that you have a gap in your career. Now, how can you view this weakness as a strength? Yes, you can. It doesn't make sense. I'll help you to make sense. How can you view it as a strength? How can you address the fact that there is no risk, so the threat? And how can you show that it's an opportunity for the employer? So all three. So let's do that right now, step by step. The weakness is uh, you have a gap in your career. Now, how can you view it as a strength? You can be like, okay, during this period of time, and going back to skills, during this period of time, I learned things that I've never learned before. And that sets you apart from any Tom, Dick, or Harry who's been in Goldman Sachs for 25 years, right? It's a very linear progression. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but yes, you're different. And sometimes different is better than better. And the other way that you can show the weakness as a strength is by explaining that you're taking your time. You're not interviewing in 100 different companies. You're very picky because you want the next one to be, a longer relationship, and you're hungry for it, right? So that's S, strength. And how can you address the fact that the threat? What is the threat? The threat is, what if you have another gap in your career? Why should me as an employer hire you when I stand to lose, the return on investment? You can address that in a very simple way. Speak in past tense. So the reason for taking the break no longer exists. Use past tense. If my child was ill, he's not ill anymore. He's back in kindergarten. I was unwell. It's fine. I was laid off, but I've learned all these skills. I'm raring to go. So all of those reasons are in the past and no longer affect your candidacy. And the last one is opportunity. How can you use this weakness as an opportunity? You can. Not only are you qualified, not only are you able, but you are immediately available. So I don't know about you, but when I, as a recruiter, find someone who's amazing, they look like they know what they're talking about, and they can join me next week, that's a pretty good combination.
Yeah, that's a great combination. Well, it's been a terrific conversation. So tell us what's next for you.
Yeah, so great things ahead, Mac. I'm working towards, short 90-minute workshops, particularly targeted towards people who are in transition but have almost no budget, and help them out for a very limited, for a very limited budget to address specific challenges they're going through. Build a resume from scratch, or LinkedIn profile, quick, easy, digestible live courses. That's the difference. It's going to be live. So I'm excited.
That does sound exciting. Now, I know our listeners can learn more about your courses and your work by visiting your website. It is superchargeyourself.com. Sonal, given all the great tips you've shared today, what's the one thing you want a listener to remember about how to deal with long-term unemployment?
When a recruiter rejects you because life happened to you, it says more about them than it does about you. Don't forget that.
Make sure you never miss an episode of Find Your Dream Job. Subscribe to our free podcast newsletter. You'll get information about our guests and transcripts of every show. Go to maxlist.org/show notes. Again, that's maxlist.org/show notes. Next week, our guest will be Greg Flores. He's the Associate Director of Career Services at Portland State University. Greg helps people prepare for meaningful careers and understand the world of work. You may change jobs 10 or 15 times, and as you do this, a personal mission statement can help you stay focused on your long-term goals. Join us next week when Greg Flores and I talk about how to write your personal mission statement. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job.